So, Emma, I'm going to come to you. Have you got a microphone? Everyone's offering microphones. So, you are the founder of SelfMadeHero, absolutely incredible independent publisher of graphic novel, which is the partner on the first graphic novel award, which means that you will be publishing later on this year Alex's book, which won the first round. But we're not going to talk specifically about that yet. We are, in fact, going to talk about the first graphic novel that you published.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm not a creator. I'm a bit of an anomaly on this judging panel because I don't create graphic novels, but I do publish them. And how I started was a while ago. It's 18 years next February, and I had an idea to make Shakespeare more accessible and to do a manga Shakespeare range. And I see Paul Gravett is there, and I remember very vividly meeting Paul Gravett, who is the font of knowledge of all graphic novels, and we met outside the British Museum near what used to be Gosh Comics. And I said, I've got this idea, what do you think? And I think you were very encouraging. Anyway, I went on to launch the first two titles in the manga Shakespeare series, Romeo and Juliet and Hamlet. And so I may not be a talent myself, but I'm good at spotting talent. And with Romeo and Juliet, when the pitches came in, Sonia Leon sent a pitch, and it said Romeo and Juliet was set in modern day Japan. And Romeo was this J-pop rock star. So it's like, yes, that's going to do it. And then Hamlet was set in a cyber world of the future. And again, that was going to do it. And I commissioned Emma Hayley to do that. And that was how I began as a publisher. And I know that all you guys here, you'll be at like different levels. Some may not have ever, had anything to do with comics at all, but you're budding and you really want to do one. Some maybe have more experience, but when I started, I had absolutely no experience in publishing, other than once working in a book publishers. But in terms of like running my own company, I had no idea. So I learned on the job, and with Manga Shakespeare, it just happened to be a success. And from there, 18 years on, I published all sorts of graphic novels, in all sorts of genres, so non-fiction, fiction, and really anything. So one thing about this competition is, if you look on our website, we have different series. You're not constrained by what we do. So one thing is, if you look on our website in terms of submissions, you might be a little bit constrained by, okay, maybe look at what we do and what our formats are. But for this competition, I'm open to lots of different ideas. So don't feel constrained by that. I just echo what Karrie said in terms of her advice. When you do pick your 15 to 20 pages that you want to submit for the competition, make them the most exciting pages that you feel will be part of your story. So really eye-catching, and just make sure they're really the best they can possibly be. That's it.
Thank you, Emma. That was brilliant. Oscar.
Okay.
I believe you just.
Can I go next to you because?
Yes, of course. Sorry, Alex. We keep moving you around. So I believe you've just returned from Argentina.
Oh yeah.
But although that's where you're from, you've right, but you've lived and worked in London for over 50 years, am I right? And you've done loads of extraordinary collaborations, including with Alan Moore and others. But you have your own books. Most recently, Thomas Girton, which, as I said,
you haven't seen it, yeah.
I certainly have. It's wonderful. Oh no, it's a brilliant book. It's an absolutely brilliant book. But your first graphic novel was The Park. Am I right?
Sorry?
Your first graphic novel was The Park.
Park, yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about that and how that came to be published?
As you said before, I'm part of a generation in comics. I grew up with idea, and I done pictures, obviously pictures. So I grew up, the culture was always there was a writer. The one that's the picture what the writer did. and I grew up with that kind of situation. Can I make a little kind of I'm amazed what I can see in front of me. About 40 years ago, this would be mostly males with the occasional girlfriends. What I can see now is women, if possible, with boyfriends. It's amazing. I'm very happy, that things are changing, that's great. For a long time, I never thought that I was going to, if somebody was thinking about it, then I would do the best with the visuals. But then after a while of working with different people, every time that I chose to work with a writer, always I provide kind of the idea of what I want to do there, and I say, I'm interested, and we can evolve. And always it's been with the writers that more or less I have chosen, is it began to be a collaboration. That it was very good that they are working with somebody else, because it was quite an intimate creative relationship. It's a kind of mixing dreams and nightmares with somebody else, and then gradually the whole thing started growing. And that was a very good time for me. But then also, like everything moves very organic, I thought, oh, I can start working by myself. Also, we have to live in England, and as you can hear, it's my second language. So I wasn't feeling very confident about writing. But then I said, yes, I can write. Somebody would read, but I can write. And then it becomes to be a need. Okay, I want to take the whole thing by myself. I can do the pictures. And then something happens. It was the roots of the bar. I was bitten by a dog in Portugal. And it wasn't very nice because every day I had to go to the clinic for the injection. I had to get something out of this. And then gradually the whole thing started growing, and then the other things are floating around. And I guess when you're working an idea, it's almost sometimes the things that you really love to work on are things that you have difficulties with to do. Anger, this is a mixture of things you're doing. And then the love, Lauren and Hardy films. I thought, oh, this is a good time for me to make it on the point. And then gradually the story started. It was a kind of very slow process. I work very slow. It's a question of I feel, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I have a conviction, because then you have to sit down and work for years. So when you sit down by yourself, you really, this has to make sense. Otherwise, what's the point to be sitting down? And then I presented to Emma the book.
How much had you done at that point?
Oh, to her? Oh, just
you hadn't finished it before.
An idea. I done something with her before as an editor. And I talked like that about London. I wasn't an editor of that. Different people in that. And Emma said yes. And then that book come out. So it wasn't very difficult for me. But
thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's great to hear. We need to move on.
Yeah.
So, Janette.
Oh, that's it.
Yeah. Well, let's stay there. We've got more questions. We may get to that. No, so stay there, because we'll come and have another round of questions. I just want to make sure that we get everybody's sort of origin story of their first thing. So, Janette, you're founder of Arch Comics, and you investigate contemporary life in many different media, and you're the author of This Is Not a Memoir.
Yes,
so, can you tell us a little bit about that and about the model by which you published that?
Well, This Is Not a Memoir. Okay, I was approached by an arts publisher called Waterstones Press,
And they said they wanted to work with me a few years ago, and it didn't happen. And then they came back to me and said, "Oh, are you working on anything?" So I just showed them a few comics I was working on, and they said, "Yes. Do you want to do something?" And I said, "Okay, I'll try and write a graphic novel, basically, like you do." And then I ended up creating This Is Not a Memoir, and I think you can see some of the pages. So I was hoping that the sort of reader wouldn't be sure or wasn't sure whether it was true or not, basically. So there's sort of a fine line between whether this is my history or whether it's completely fictionalized, actually. I'll be honest, some of it is true, actually.
Right.
Basically.
But you're not going to tell us which bits.
But I'm not going to tell you which bits, basically. So you can either sort of jailbreak that one copy that's on the desk in the room, basically, or try and get hold of a copy somewhere, because it was a very small print run. But anyway, this is it. So I was trying to sort of introduce a sort of prose version of a graphic novel, using sort of anecdotes and observations and locations that do actually exist. They may not exist now, but they did at the time, maybe 10, 20 years ago. And then write my history of those locations around it. So that's it, really. And there's a couple of pages of Arch comic on the screen. Really. So Arch comics, they're still continuing, but I tend to do them if I'm invited to do an exhibition. But anyway, we'll just talk about first graphic novels. So I will just focus on This Is Not a Memoir. But you can still get a copy. It's a very small print run.
Where can we buy it?
Yeah, okay. You can try and contact Montez Press. I'm not sure how many copies they've got here tonight, but apparently they've got one, which hasn't been opened. So I'm not sure we're allowed to open the one copy.
Right, it sounds very collectible.
Yeah, it's very collectible, actually. So it's a very small print run, so there might be a few copies hanging around. But
good to know.
contact Montez Press.
Montez Press.
Yes.
Excellent, thank you. Shazleen, I'm going to come to you. So you're an illustrator and author.
Thank you.
Microphone. And you've worked with several publishers, Simon & Schuster and Bloomsbury, but you also, am I right, you do some illustration work for Dishoom as well?
Yes, I did, yeah.
Excellent organisation. But you've also sort of self-published quite a lot of work, both online and physical. Now, Booza, two exclamation marks, not actually your first
Not
comic.
actually my first comic, no. I will also add to my accolades of I've worked with Penguin, Random House, Abrams, Macmillan, and Hachette. And those are like, 4 of the big 5 of
You've
publishing.
nearly done the set.
I've nearly done the set, yeah, because Simon & Schuster is the other one. So it's just HarperCollins left. I have a bingo card, which is my hopes and dreams to fulfill. But yeah, like you said, Booza is not my first comic. It is probably the comic I'm the best known for. But actually I started making comics as a 16-year-old. And I started publishing comics with Sweat Drop Studios, which previously Emma Hayley, and the images supplied a lot of the comics I made when I was 16. But Emma Hayley and Sonia Leon, grabbing my book, they mentored me a lot and helped me publish my first comic as a teenager. And then I went to university and did all these kind of things. But I think sometimes, I'm not sharing pictures of what I made as a teenager because it was obviously bad. It was obviously not good. But I did also make 4 graphic novels before I finished uni. And I talk a lot at events like this about sort of starting a journey, and maybe many of the people who are going to be applying for this competition are very early in their careers, or they've never had something published and things. And I think I am a bit of an exception to that, of this rule of I started very young. But sometimes it's good to do things like at any age, because as I was studying, like I studied with people the same age as me, people much older than me who are still like working on their very first project. And I think like what helped me make a comic at that age was having like a good work ethic and sort of giving myself like milestones. So especially for people who are applying, I actually did apply to Sweatdrop with just 15 pages, similar to this competition. And I sort of set myself a goal of if I could do 15 pages, then maybe I could do a volume. And then if I could do a volume, I could do a series. And that's how I published my first like few books. They're all out of print. No one should look them up. I'm not naming them. But then after I'd done that, obviously, if you've made all these comics as a teenager and a young adult, you can end up making like a good book afterwards. So this is my webcomic Booza, and this is the one I made. Also non-fiction. This is the one I made as an adult and after graduating university, and I went through self-publishing again because at that point I'd had like a good workflow and I sort of knew how I could do things. I was working a part-time job at the time too, and I did it on Kickstarter. But my first actually published book with like a big mainstream publisher that I didn't have to, pay for out of pocket was Saving Sunshine, which is this book. Sorry, I have so many books for various reasons. But yeah, Saving Sunshine, which came out in 2023. And this one was nominated for a Harvey and an Eisner, and Booza last year won the Ignatz. So I feel like it's going fine. But thank you.
It's going great.
But yeah, like I think my real thing is like it's difficult making a comic at the start. I started very young, and that's why I am where I am. You are starting at wherever you're starting. It's a long, kind of what you said, it's a long and slow process to make these things. You have to take it one step at a time.
You've got to work through the stages.
You've got to work through the stages,
brilliant.
yeah.
Thank you.
That's all right.
So that's your judges. And our other special guest, other panelist, as I mentioned before, is Alex Taylo, who is champion of the first edition of the first graphic novel competition. So author of Bone Broth, which is in the process of being completed at the moment, and it's due for publication later this year by SelfMadeHero. So Alex, it would be great to hear from you how it's going, what the process has been like up till now. How are you finding it?
Yeah, really good. I think doing the competition and kind of obviously getting to meet so many kind of people who've already published graphic novels, who work on comics, as well as obviously having advice from like Emma and Corinne and everyone. It's just been so helpful because I feel I was really lost in the beginning. I really didn't know what I was doing. This is my first project of this scale. So it's just been an amazing experience in every possible way so far.
So that kind of the comics community, which you've kind of accessed, through this award, is that helping you kind of creatively, or is it more sort of like the practical kind of nuts and bolts stuff, or maybe both?
Yeah, both. I think in every way, to be honest, just from like getting advice on different people's processes in terms of making their comics, as well as like, being invited to new fairs and stuff, and new comic, like the Ink Comic Fair that happened last year. Some of the people working on that are in the audience. Yeah, just meeting so many people and also feeling so included, like I'm really welcome in this kind of creative community has been really lovely.
That's brilliant to hear. And I as a relatively recent convert to kind of comics myself, it's something that I really notice is how kind of supportive and how collaborative the whole scene is, and yeah, that kind of welcome comes across to me too. Have you got any advice for entrants to the competition in terms of how to approach it?
I would say my best advice is just don't get in your own way, because when I was applying, like right up until the end of it, I really didn't think it would sort of take me anywhere. I just kind of thought, I have this idea, let me like throw it out there, see what happens. And I mean, like the most amazing thing happens, so you never know. And I really think, yeah, you should just give it a go and don't trip yourself up. Just why not have a crack at it?
And tripping yourself up, so like not trying to do something that's kind of on trend or commercial or whatever, just kind of going with your creative impulse. Is that what you?
Yeah, well, it's also really hard as a person to see accurately where you're at, and sometimes you do need that sort of response and feedback from other people, you know, whether that's from the judges or from other people in the community. It can just really help to throw your ideas out there and actually try something. Yeah,
And that's I guess that's a vulnerable thing to do, but for you, it's been a rewarding.
definitely a positive. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Alex. It's brilliant to have your stuff on the. If you like, you can save yourself from any further discomfort of being on the panel, and you can sit yourself down, because basically now we've got about 15 minutes more for me to throw some more questions at the judges about the process and their kind of advice, and then we'll have maybe another 10-15 minutes for you guys to ask them questions. So I suppose just start with a basic question for any of you to respond to. What are you looking for in the entries? What's going to excite you? Maybe that's an impossible thing to answer, but I mean, give some idea of what you're looking for.
So I was a judge on the last one. It's we had so many very good entries, like really high standard entries, that it actually was a very difficult decision to make. It was difficult to get to the long list. It was difficult to get to the short list, and then, oh my God, picking a winner is so difficult.
Was there violence? Did it get a bit rough?
No violence. It's going to be different on every competition, I think. I think the last one for me, I can only speak for myself. I think Bone Broth stood out in terms of originality, and that's rare, you know. Some sort of approaching a maybe a subject that's been approached before, but approached in a slightly different way, in a more original way. A different retelling of something. Yeah, and I would say story is the most important thing, first and foremost. And then once you've got the good story, then your art and your pacing and your lettering and everything else should be as best as you can do it. That's a terrible sentence.
Let's gloss over the grammar there, but that's really interesting that story comes first. So, and that might actually inform what people's selection of their material, actually, because, you know, if I don't know, like if you had a particularly cherished sort of, you know, full page image or whatever, but which didn't necessarily move the story on, you might say favor things which actually kind of deliver the narrative a little bit more, because that's more what's going to draw you in.
I'm talking personally here.
Sure.
So the other judges may have different opinions on that.
Yeah, please.
I'd agree.
I think also following what Emma said, I think what that person is telling, initial thing, is the most important thing. The other important thing is how that person going to tell the story. Comics, graphic novels, is a language. It's a language, it has its own grammar. So it's very important, because it's graphic. So the pictures also have to work, sometimes without words, because it's part of the language. And that is when the comic began to be very interesting. No, when only the pictures are supporting the text. It's just, this is a ping pong. That's what I particularly I've been looking at. If they are dealing for what I think is the actual language of comics.
So it's something that can only be a comic, perhaps.
Yeah. It's, but then it has to be sustained by a very solid idea of what, but I cannot separate This is one thing, is what that person wants to tell and how it's telling. It's not a difference.
Yeah, understood. Thank you. Janette?
No, it's almost the same thing I was going to say. I mean, I don't think you can separate the graphic imagery from the text. And I think they do need to work together. Basically, I do understand what Oscar's saying, that the image on its own should sort of drive the story forward. But if the story slightly doesn't work, then no matter how good the graphics are, I don't think the novel will work anyway, basically. So that's what I would be looking for, a sort of strong hook that sort of, that sort of connects to the visuals.
Shazleen, anything to add to that? Or?
I do actually want to see good art as well. Sorry, to be evil.
That's not evil at all.
Yeah.
It's just all going to add to the debate and the rouse.
Yeah. I do actually want to see really high standards of art. I think art that isn't good at storytelling is also bad art. So that is to do with what everyone else has said. Much to what everyone said, if like there was a page and it was gorgeous and it did not serve the purpose, I think that's bad art too. But I do want to see like high quality art. I would love to see something that's really interesting in deep in the way it's been depicted. And I'm also interested in hearing voices that we don't necessarily hear. I'm interested in viewpoints and people and stories that we might not see. And that doesn't necessarily have to be something that's like genre specific. That can be something very small. I think like as someone who comes from like a marginalized background, as many people on this panel are as well, sometimes the things that we see as like regular are like very interesting. Similar to Janette, actually, I really liked the stuff that you showed of your first book and how those were places that don't exist anymore. Something like that is such a unique and specific viewpoint. And I think that could be a point of inspiration. Like, don't think that your idea is too small or too niche. I really want to see those ideas too.
That's a really interesting point that people should. So it doesn't need to be epic. It
doesn't have to be like bombastic and crazy. It can be
right.
something small and something personal.
As long as it's original. What other kind of advice have we got for entrance? Well, I mean, and it could be real kind of nuts and bolts stuff. It could be more kind of conceptual and creative.
Well, just make sure that we can actually read it, which sounds a bit silly, doesn't it? Really?
Sounds fairly sensible to me. So you can say more about that. We're talking about
the sort of quality of the images, or the quality of the JPEG, or the quality of the images that you upload. If they're too poor, then we can't see them. Then it's quite easy to dismiss, even if it was brilliant.
I will give everyone specific DPI. The first thing I learned was don't make anything smaller than 300 DPI. If you have Photoshop or any drawing software, make sure it's at minimum. Try and do like an A4 page. Obviously you can have it any funky like size you want, but try at least to make an A4 page, because then you can scale it down to be smaller, but you can't scale anything bigger. And often like my books are mostly A5 and smaller, but SelfMadeHero does a lot of beautiful editions that are quite bigger and in interesting shapes as well. So at least try and make something as big as A4, maybe make it even bigger if you can. If you're working digitally, it's easy to do that. Obviously, traditionally it's difficult, like different, and that would be a material issue as well. But that would be my minimum. And also, for anyone who's working on these kind of things, I think one of the things that I work a lot with students, and I work with artists of different ranges and all that kind of stuff. One of the biggest mistakes I find is people who don't know how to do bleeds and people who don't know how to make correct margins for their books. Make sure that when like we're going to be using panels for the most part. Make sure your panels are like separated evenly. Make sure you have consistent spacing between all your stuff, because that's one of those things that people don't really like pay attention to, but is the difference between someone who's like experienced and not experienced. And yeah, also look at where your bubbles are going. Like look at how someone is possibly reading through the page. That's one of the most basic, but maybe like understated things is, yeah, make sure the read order is really clear on your pages. Maybe that's basic.
Excellent. This reminds me of that thing. Is it Picasso who said that famous thing about when artists meet, they don't talk about the nature of truth and light. They talk about where to buy cheap turpentine. And the equivalent of that is graphic novelists, when they get together, they talk about DPI and margins and stuff like that. And why not? I certainly actually thinking about it when you mentioned that about the resolution. Go on.
Just a second.
Go
I would like to there. Is anybody here who are thinking about sending their work for us to have a look? Anybody here? So
A few shy hands
what you're
going
thinking? What's your expectations? What you're doing?
My expectations in submitting.
It's to win.
Yeah. I would love to have that much confidence. I mean, I'm kind of interesting. I think part of it is just to kind of honor myself in that process. Making the book was wonderful. It healed me in a lot of ways. I'm not done making the book, but I do have enough to submit. And it would be nice just as a kind of message to myself that I am legit enough to do this. That was kind of the main reason. And if anything happens,
You are thinking about a graphic novel.
Yeah.
That's what you're thinking. So how many pages are you going to send to us for us to judge?
20 probably.
20 pages.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
So you have to, your 20 pages are going to talk for you, right?
Yeah.
So, okay,
Hopefully.
look up after those 20 pages,
Yeah.
because that's what we are gonna think about it, whether it works or not.
Yeah.
Good luck.
No pressure.
Excellent. So since Oscar's kicked off the Q&A bit, we've got, I think, about 10-15 minutes in which we can take questions from the audience, and these can be absolutely on the level of DPI and margins and stuff like that, or they can be about creative ideas, more conceptual stuff. Got a question right there.
I wanted to bring up the topic of graphic medicine, because you've been talking about story, but I feel that graphic medicine is a sort of burgeoning field, because of my vision for the future is, for example, 71% of people over 70 experience hearing loss. And I would love there to be a graphic novel of what that means that people would go to first to understand the process, understand hearing aids. So I feel that's a whole big area which isn't yet developed. And the other thing I wanted to say, as well as people wanting to publish the novels, look at other kind of ways of putting your work out there, because Art Angel had a big exhibition of 4,000 objects, and they put in my graphic novel in a prominent place at the beginning of this exhibition, and they turned the pages throughout the 3 months of the exhibition, and they're still inviting people to submit what they call hobbyists. I would call us makers. So consider that as somewhere of getting your work out there.
Yeah, great thought. And would the panel like to pick up on any of that? Maybe the sort of fiction, non-fiction thing.
Actually, I can pick up
Yes,
on that
why not?
because Karrie Fransman, who ran away earlier on, when I was at Myriad, I asked her if she would do a graphic novel about hearing loss. And that was, I think that was even before The House That Groaned happened, or about the same time. Anyway, she didn't, but there are quite a few of us on this panel, including myself, that absolutely agree with you.
Another question? Yes.
This is along the lines of DPI, but what are your thoughts on hand lettering versus fonts? I think you should use. Oh, sorry.
I'll just repeat the question just in case anybody didn't hear it. So, thoughts on hand lettering versus fonts?
You should use fonts. hand lettering. You should use fonts. The only thing you should hand letter is like sound effects. You can make a font out of your own handwriting, which is what I do. I have 3 different like custom fonts for my own stuff. Which is like this is one of sorry, I used the wrong picture. This is like my own handwriting like font. As is like that one. So I definitely recommend doing like if you do want to hand render and you do want to have your own personal touch, make a font out of your own handwriting. There's a few online tools for it. And you can also use tools like Illustrator to create more variation on that. I think also Affinity, there's like an Affinity design like version of Illustrator that's like a one-off payment in case you don't want to use Adobe. But I definitely think, especially when it comes to having to make edits, I'm really bad at spelling. I'm really bad at like forgetting like words and like letters. And I make 1,000 typos every single book I make, and I made so many books. So I would really recommend use a font because it will make it easier in the long-term process of you getting this comic out to different people. Yeah, then.
Yeah.
I might have to
Okay,
slightly disagree.
That's fine. That's why we have a bus.
Can I take another version? Another version.
Hang on 1 second, Oscar.
It does depend
Janette
on
went
how
first.
visual you want the text to be. So if it's a really important part of the process, then obviously do a sort of version of your own handwritten to text turned into a sort of digital format, basically. That's what I would do. Because rather than just say use all, because I think dry font is dry, basically. So,
Interesting. Oscar?
so we could.
Every single thing that is in that page, it counts. You have to do the whole page. Sometimes doing the letter by hand, sometimes it really works very well in your work. And you got to be much more kind of dance. It does better the page because it's your hand and it goes along with the drawing. So what you have in the whole page is something very coherent. Some people use font because it's quicker, but then you have to take your decision. But first, I think you have to look at the page, and you are the best judge. What is the best for your work, or what it works better? Because everything that is there, what you do, it counts. So you have to have a control over every little thing. You have to have a control.
It may take you years.
And the deadline is after the project. Hope that's all clear. Another question. Yes. You. Here, have this one.
Sorry for asking for the mic. When it comes to having a concept for a comic, how do you get from the stage of the percolations of ideas to getting a script where you know where you want that story to end? Like, what's your process? Do you write out the script like beat by beat? Do you also put thumbnails along with it? Like, what sort of assurances do you put before you start getting to the larger scale sketch, ink, color, and assembling those panels into the story that you want to construct? How do you have the first skeleton of said story?
Can I? Yeah, it's yeah, that's a what you have to start taking decisions when you have an idea. What I found myself is to have a map, and that is say for what I want to talk in this story. I want to talk about this. I will give about 4 pages, and then these 2 pages, whatever. And then the maps are very flexible, but it helps you to begin with to have an idea, even how many pages you need in order to tell what you want to tell. No? So a map just for this conversation, this situation here, this journey by car. So each of these, I did it. Once you start working on each section, then you will see you will need more pages or less pages. But it's better to have a map, you know, almost by sections. Yeah, that's but it's very difficult when you have the whole thing of what should I do now? A map, it really helps. Allocate into pages.
Would you ever embark on a project and not know how it's going to end?
If that happens, yeah, that happens very well. It happens very often, but you deal with them, and then so now you have to go back and renew them at the beginning because the end is much more interesting, but that's got too much to do with the beginning. So it's a long process.
And any other approaches to Shazleen?
Oh, sorry, do you want to-
No, you go.
I like to know what the ending of the stories are before I start working on something. I do think every story is different and also every practitioner is very different. I've worked in a lot of different like I do commercially a lot of genre fiction, but I also do a lot of autobiography, and I think the way I work across those two different things are completely different. A lot of the time when I'm making a genre piece, I don't often write a script at all. I'm usually just writing like bits and pieces of dialogue and maybe a synopsis, but I do always know where I want something to end. So I'd recommend again, like try and work on those 15 pages or something, similar to what Oscar said. Like, you might find that some parts need a little bit more breathing room and other parts don't, but I would really recommend knowing where you want the emotional ending of the narrative to be. And that might change a little bit, like the scene might change, but that's always the most helpful for me. And also having like very important, either if it's narration or dialogue, having that written, and it doesn't have to be a panel breakdown, but having that written down, and you can change it again. But for some of the scenes I've had, like in my head, I know exactly like I want this character to say one thing or whatever. So just make sure that is kind of put in focus and have like a post-it note or something. So then you can always go back to it and you reframe it in your mind.
No, I agree with you. You said it all for me, basically.
No, sorry.
No. I mean, I think it's difficult to finish something if you don't know how it ends. So I would have thought you might, you could slightly change the ending, but you normally have like an 80 to 90% idea of where you want it to end up, basically. So yeah, I agree with Shazleen that it would be good that you knew the ending, or at least 90% of it.
I also have a little extra to add, sorry.
Yeah.
I also think like I was saying, like every story has a different shape. Some of them are linear and some of them like some narratives can have like parts. So you can kind of break it down to like, if your character has like a really specific story arc, maybe you need to make it build up and have a certain amount of time allocated to the build up, and then the sort of crux of the whatever drama is happening, and then the denouement, or like the lowering of, I don't know words, the lowering of like action. But other stories might be like a memoir, or it might be something that's like a cycle of different things. So they might have mini story arcs between them, or you create a narrative through sort of eclectic like memories that are being shared. So I think that's also something to think of, is where do you want your reader to kind of go on this journey? Do you want them to kind of build up and then go down, or do you want them to feel different things, or things need to kind of lead back to something they read at the start? That's also maybe something to think about.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be linear.
Emma, you'll have experienced different creators with different kind of processes and different ways of planning their projects. Is there anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, everyone is different, and you should approach it in the way that you feel more comfortable approaching it. I mean, if you were asking my advice, though, I would say write the script before you do the rest of it. And even if that, when you start drawing it, even if that script changes, that's fine. But it's just having that down, and your beginning, your middle, your end, I think is important, because you can just find yourself getting rather lost if you just sort of start it knowing I've got some kind of idea of what's happening here. But yeah, that would be my advice.
10 years later.
Yeah, exactly. Where's it going? We don't know. Question here. Do you need a microphone, or are you going to project?
I'm going to project.
Well done.
Thanks. Hi. I was wondering, my thing I'm going to do is because it's autobiographical and it's neurospice, so it's loads of different styles. And I was thinking, like, if I was to give in 15 pages, and it's like, these are 15 of the different styles within my book. This is how my brain works. Will you all just think I'm mental and have a fun way, and then like this person doesn't know how to do the thing? Or would you rather have a bunch of sections of a little bit to prove I can do a flow? Do you know what I mean? The flow is quite disjointed.
If that's part of the synopsis, you can describe that, couldn't you, in a paragraph? Then that's.
But I guess like as well as make that, so on top, so that will say that in the synopsis.
Yeah.
Would you rather see a bunch of different styles to show that I can do it? Do you know, or anyone to do it?
Can I just say, it feels like you're kind of pre-selling your submission. And I think that's really quite impressive.
Yeah, do it without a microphone, everyone.
Very good. But actually, but I think that is a really important point, is that, you know, you do have that, the synopsis bit. You can describe the project and then show the execution of it, and the judges will be able to, you know, kind of fill in the gaps and understand what you're trying to do with the thing. But yeah.
I think like it would be good to have, like, if you have 15 pages, and I don't know how many styles you're thinking of, but at least a sequence of 3 pages in one style. Yeah. I think that would have been like good, because then we can kind of understand. And then in your description, you obviously explain to us. So yeah, I think that would be good to show us everything.
So there's a notion of kind of narrative progression rather than just being like a portfolio.
Well, yeah, exactly. So like if there was 3 pages and it's a sequence, and then maybe 4 pages, maybe 5 pages or whatever, and like I think that's a good way to sample artwork. Yeah.
Thank you, Lance.
Still it's not very clear for me as a judge. Is Emma, is a rule about the people who are going to get involved in the competition? How many pages, the minimum?
Yeah, so it's 15 to 20 pages, and sequential, as, yeah. And
So 15, 20 pages, you start having an idea. Yeah.
So
Yeah, 15, 20 pages, definitely start having an idea where possible. Where are you, definitely, but where you want to go, possible. Yeah. One can speculate.
Another question. There's 2 here. You first, and then you. Yeah, go for it.
Thank you. It's nice to have a mic. I'll give it back. I've never really considered myself a colorist. I kind of feel like I have to reinvent that job every time I do it. I was wondering if you had any thoughts about coloring that you've seen in comics you thought were successful, or your own comics that you've liked. Do you have any particular thoughts in terms of like complex palettes or simple palettes?
Who would like to address that?
I think it's good to always reinvent yourself, and I think it's good to always come at things new. I hate doing things the same every time. Every comic I make is a little bit different because it's boring otherwise. That's just me. I think like what is helpful is having a strong visual idea, and how the visual idea of your style or your coloring style influences the story you're making. I think that would be something that I'd really like to see, is a marriage between the visual style choices and the narrative. So I would pay attention. You should like make sure these things feel cohesive. And I also think working with a palette, maybe something that's limited, is always better, personally, because I think that creates a stronger vision as well. And that's what I would suggest, make a palette, make something cohesive.
So a limited palette, but not sort of dogmatic, sort of my personal palette, project to project.
I think, yeah, I think a palette could be, when I say limited, it can be something that's like 30 colors, but it could be 30 colors that are tinted, or skew towards a thing. For every project, I try and make a slightly different palette, depending on like maybe the weather in the comic or whatever. But so long as I sort of speaks to the narrative you're working on, like I could talk, like my main comic Blues, which you can read online for free, has a really warm palette because it's set in a really hot country. So everything is skewed a little bit yellow. There isn't a true blue in that comic. Everything is a little bit warmer. So that's what I mean. Like it can be a varied palette, but maybe have like a conscious choice as to which way it kind of leans, you know.
If not, we'll come to you. Do you want the microphone?
Thank you. Yeah, hi, and very pleased to meet you guys. I'm interested to know, because I see a lot of artwork these days that is literally achieved through the computer. I wondered if any of you still work with the old traditional pens and paints offline first, or whether you do a combination of both. That's one question. Also, I'd be very interested to know what would be a typical working week and how much would you normally achieve in 1 week on a graphic novel? Thank you.
I'm normally against multi-part questions, but both parts of that were really interesting. And I actually want to hear from everybody about all of that stuff, actually. So yeah,
Okay,
who wants to lead on?
if I understood, people are working either digitally or by hand. Well, I work by hand. I mean, you flick through my book. I work on paper and watercolor. I don't know. You say it's traditional, you know. It's just that's what interests me. I like that they are working with materials and with water and with paper. This is more of a physical thing. That's what I prefer to work. I can't work digital.
And how
I
about
can
you?
understand it's another tool,
Yeah.
but I can't.
And what's your typical working week like?
Huh?
Your typical working week? That's the second part of the question.
Well, 8 hours a day. Yeah, still, yeah. Well, because it takes time. And if you are not happy, you have to do again. If you're working digital, it's much more easy to correct.
Oh, I don't know about
Definitely. Definitely. By someone who's working by paper or by hand, is I can see friends working. My book, the book on getting to about 6-7 years. Someone who worked digitally for half a time, 100 pages, I mean, definitely. Because
Janette, you're
well, it takes me forever to do a digital drawing. So I mean, there's some things that are quicker. You can change your colour. That's it, really. But you still have to think of the idea. You still have to do the drawing. That's it, really. And I work purely digitally. I mean, I can draw. I think people assume that you can't draw if you're working digitally, but I work digitally because maybe I've just got used to it. But also, I create animations, so it's kind of so it's kind of that's the reason why I work digitally as well.
and what's your working week like?
Oh, so I'll say I work 10 hours a day.
Not a competition.
Stagnation. Yeah, I mean, I work in bursts, so I don't necessarily work every day, but I do work in bursts. And if I've got a deadline, then it is every day. And that's how I tend to work. You get a burst of creativity, and that's how I tend to work.
Yeah, I work both digitally and traditionally. I've made comics fully in watercolor, and I've also made comics fully digitally. I ended up, most of my comics now end up with the final stage being digital just because I work commercially and it's important to work in a way that's easily transferable to people. So if you are working traditionally, absolutely do it. I'm sure your work is going to be beautiful, but also have in mind that it would be useful to get a little bit used to digital processes, just because at the final stage, if you win this competition, someone's going to have to digitize that work. And so it would be useful to at least have that in the back of your mind, that you will have to one day scan it in and send it off. My working week is I work probably 8 hours a week. I work Monday to Friday, and this week I've been doing 10 pages of roughs every day. And I just sit there and I do my work. I try and do things because I work on graphic novels mostly. I don't sort of finish a page on a day. I kind of do it all in stages. So I'll finish all the roughs, and then I'll do all the inks, and then I'll do all the colors. And as I'm working on, let's say, the colors, because I'm working with clients, they may come in with ink edits. So I'll, intersperse like edits on my inks. And that's a big reason why I work digitally, is because if you are working with clients, as you progress in your career, they're gonna want to make changes, and they're gonna realize you made a mistake too, and you'll have to go back and edit things. So that, like, I work digitally because it's helpful for my process and making big scale projects like that.
Brilliant, thank you. Corinne, I think we're about out of time, aren't we? So
Yes.
Yeah, I'm gonna hand over to you then for the next bit.
Okay, thank you very much, James, and thank you, kind of Oscar, Shazleen, Janette, and Emma, and Karrie, who's missing, and also Alex, wherever he is. Yeah, over there. So just for the practicalities, it is 15 to 20 pages of a work in progress, which can be sort of different sequences, mindful of what Shazleen said about them having to make sense. And we do want A4 size. We want it, we want submitted digitally. So email us your PDF, and also we have to have it in physical so we can actually look at it, and that makes a huge amount of difference. I say we, but I'm not judging, which is a great shame because I feel I'd like to quarrel with you all. But anyway, there'll be more of that anon, no doubt. And I'll feed you well and give you drinks and things, and hopefully it'll be a pleasant time. So, and just people have been asking about the process. With it's actually the call out. It ends on the 22nd of April. And then we'll prepare the scripts for judging and so on, and we'll have a couple of judging meetings and a lot of reading in between, as well as all together. And then the shortlisting will be, I think, in September, or the long listing will be in September, and I think the shortlisting late October, and then the revealing of the winner will be in December. So it's, anyway, stay with us on the way. Thank you so much for coming tonight. Thank you, Waterstones. Thank you, Nessa Urquhart at Waterstones, who's been a real champion of this award. And thank you to the Cartoon Museum over there, coming past, and Emma again, Cartoon Museum, and Emma Hayley at SelfMadeHero, our partners. Thanks a lot, and I think there's still some drink over there, and do chat with any of us. Thanks, Jim.